I need one of those. That's
No
awesome.
kidding. What does it say? We were just talking about before we hit
Hot
live.
coffee, hotter reloads.
Ooh.
Hot reloads is the only use of the word hot you should be allowed in tech. Like, I appreciate when we call something like a hot swap or a hot reload. So, yes, hot coffee, hotter reloads.
Ooh, I dig that. Well, for anyone who's joining in, we've got only one viewer yet, so that we'll kind of let people start to come in. But um, I'm really excited about diving into developer engagement generally and how we can build that out with AgentQL. We were talking before we hit live, right, around what we want to build and how we want to do that. I think the first part of a good conversation here is around like, what is developer engagement opportunities? Like, why do we care about those? And sort of the essence there. For my side, I'll share a little bit, and then love to hear, Rachel, on your side, Krista, if you have things you want to add in there too, which you've got some good nuggets, I think. In the developer relations space, like it's our end goal, or even really kind of anyone not in DevRel, whenever we're approaching and engaging developers, the best way to do that is like peer to peer, right? We don't really want to hang out with people that aren't smart like us or who are just aren't like us most times. And so engaging with developers is a very intricate thing to do. And so I like to look at it from an engagement side of things. So when developers are in it and they're in those pain points and they're in sort of the cusp of, oh, I have a problem to solve, that's when I like to come in and be like, hey, how can DevRel help you? Whether that be for a company, whether that be for a service offering, or whether, whatever that situation might be, of just engaging that peer-to-peer, style approach. So anyways, I'm going to stop talking because I don't want to be the one talking all the time. But Rachel, as you sort of think about, you're supporting DevRel over at AgentQL, which is a big part of what we're talking about in the show today. How do you think about developer engagement, and how has that played into your developer approach and strategy over there?
So the biggest challenge with developer engagement is it's happening in so many places ever since Twitter became X. It used to be that if you were on X or Twitter, that's where the conversation happened. You basically your strategy was let's have TweetDeck open and see if the product's mentioned or some of the hot keywords. It's changed. It also changes depending on which community you're working with. When I started working with AgentQL, I had to start learning more about the data communities and also like the scraping communities. And they do not hang out where the front end development and React communities hang out. Scraping's all over Reddit. You know what those interactions are going to be like. Also, a lot of the Reddit subreddits have really hostile to developer advocate policies. So, like, you can't link to anything. You can't even create a GitHub repo or stash that solves someone's problem and share it with them in some of these places. So, you kind of have like a list of places where it's okay to solve people's problems. Then you have to find ways to figure out which of the posts in these places actually are relevant. YouTube is another example. It's just a content fountain. And the people who talk, like the conversation in YouTube is very different from how it was on Twitter, where it's more back and forth conversation. In YouTube, it's like people just drop comments like bombs and they don't follow up. So if you're thinking, hey, that was a great comment, I want to reach out to you, you'll never hear from them again. So it's gotten a lot more complicated. You have to cover a lot more area. It's always been a challenge to go meet the community where they are, but the community has scattered. Even the front end development community, some of it's recoalesced in like Mastodon and Blue Sky, but it's just not the same game that it once was.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So,
Chris,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, jump in. I actually was going to be like, what's your take on this?
So I entirely agree with everything that's been said so far, right? And so I cut my teeth on front end, and so I joined the industry sometime around 2012, late 2011, whenever that was, doing MooTools and jQuery, and then Backbone and Angular, and all of the fun, the original Angular.js. Somebody's correcting me somewhere, but the at the time there were front end conferences. There was so much buzz in the front end community, and JavaScript was up and coming, and everybody was all about it. And over the last probably, I don't know, 3 years, maybe closely related with the pandemic, I'm not sure, it's just kind of died off. You obviously still have React and Next, but I think what's happened is, there's a lot more full stack developers, and there's folks doing front end to do front end, not because they really want to, but because they have to.
Yeah. So in that like cultural shift, do you feel like the developers are spending time in different places than they previously were? Like, think back to like your sort of origination of your career, right? And then kind of like where we're at. I mean, even think about like during COVID, right?
Sure.
The engagement tactics were so different. So from your experience of sort of seeing the evolution of the different frameworks and, full stack devs, have you noticed the influx and change of them where they spend time, where you can engage with them?
Yeah, you're balancing time, right? Front end
Right.
used to be an art, and now it's so much less of one when you have things like V0 and Tessa, you and I were just talking about V0 the other day.
Yeah.
I've seen folks take a screenshot from a template website and a JSON blob and put them both in V0, and it spits out a component, and it's spitting out 300 lines in 7 seconds.
That's insane.
Gone is the art of front end. And on top of
Oh,
that, too, you don't have roles for dedicated front end like you used to. Everybody needs to be full stack.
yeah. Oh, I made the little sad noise because like in my prime, I was the front end dev that like could tell when something was a pixel off. I'm like, nope, that's not where it needs to be. And it was just like the level of perfection. And me and the designers were just like besties because they're like, you get it. You're the developer that gets it. And oh, that makes me sad because of course a computer can do it better than a human can, right? That can
Sure.
get it to that pixel perfection
But
better than we can.
it's
Hopefully.
lost the art. It's lost the
Right.
art. And I think folks will forget how to write CSS soon enough.
I would feel bad about that, but as a person who's worked on standards, like I went to Config last year, 15,000 product designers. That's a role now. Literally people who just use Figma to design digital products. And none of the ones I talked with did CSS. They would be like, no, I let the developers, they get everything they need from the JSON. And on the one hand, I felt really down because I remember I was also last year sharing my Alice in Videoland reboot, where I took this demo from 10 years ago, this interactive, hand-drawn animated storybook, and recreated it with zero JavaScript. Well, aside from native web APIs, because all the things that I was hamstrung on and had to use like various jQuery resizers and math, et cetera, to achieve in the past, they're now all locally supported right there in your browser. It's so much lighter and more efficient. And
That's true.
I shared it and everyone was like, man, this takes me back. It's a real retro site. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean it's retro? I mean, it doesn't look like all the other websites, but come on, people. And then I was like, oh no, nobody's really making things that look different. Things are very much following a fashion trend now.
Yep.
Things line up behind them, and standing out is not necessary because as a user experience designer, you want people to be able to accomplish stuff. We don't want them to have an artistic experience. We want them to have a utilitarian experience. It's no good if you put a checkout on your website if people are too confused to use it by all your amazing hand-drawn animations. So I'm there and I'm listening to them and I'm realizing, wow, CSS is not a thing anymore. Going to the CSS conferences and hearing the CSSers being like, no one respects CSS. But then thinking, wait a minute. We created all these standards. We created all these patterns during this golden era where we tried everything, the hamburger icon, the modal. Like we did this so well. We iterated faster than people building operating systems, and we standardized. And now anybody can make something because we created the formats, the patterns, the tools. And so now you've got all these product designers who literally can make anything happen. Unfortunately, they make the same designs happen over and over again. But if they wanted to, we created the specs and the standards that nobody would have to be an expert to bring their ideas to life anymore. And that's kind of awesome. And I do feel good about that.
So I'll contrast you on something you said there. So you're talking about how everybody wants utilitarian, And I agree for products that are utilitarian. I gave a great example to Tessa the other day of, hey, I work for a bank. When somebody logs in, they're logging in because they want to accomplish something, right? They want to see their balance or make a transaction or download a statement. But when you have these websites like Facebook and Netflix and even LinkedIn to a point, they're more entertainment focused, right? And that's where you have that room for a creative license. And, that's where I think, they've unfortunately gone to utilitarian. Make that experience very custom, make it so that, oh, I'm on Facebook. Wow, this is cool. Sorry, I don't use Facebook. I haven't been on in 10 years. I can't tell you, right? But it used to just be the blue bar and the blue top bar and the white feed, and it looks and feels like anything else. Yeah. And that is the perfect excuse for some creative freedom, because people are choosing to sit and waste their time on it, not that they have to.
Yeah. It's funny because both of you talking about this and saying this, I'm like, wow, that's so true. And like again, kind of going back to sort of, and I'm thinking of like in my prime of being a front end dev, right? And the last role was like at an agency.
You're still in your prime, Tessa.
Well, like front end dev, but thank you. I'm in a better prime now, right?
You've evolved.
Yeah, I've evolved, right? But I mean, like that being the focus. Anyways, in that world, right? I was pushing every limit, just like what you were talking about. How can I build this out? How can I be browser friendly? How can I hack the system? I mean, not to age myself, but like I was dealing with IE6 nightmares, right? And so I'd try to like hack solutions to those very, very big problems of not being able to have border radius. Like, come on. Anyways, old school problems, right? And now I'm sitting here and I'm like, why does my business website is not an app? There is no reason it needs to be like everything else. And now I'm like, oh, let's put this on my next project list. I'm going to go back and just like really push the limits, because who cares what my website looks like? Like I do want to be different. It's a marketing website. And why can't we see that at least in sort of the marketing side of the products, or at least in some of the presentation side of how we brand and sort of go to market for some of these products? Although we're so off topic now, and that's okay, but this is a great topic.
I'm going to hold back. I feel like we have to move on.
Yeah, we have to move on.
I'm holding back.
We'll do another one of these.
Let's do another one, and let's just like do fun developer things, and we can put all the weird experiments on my website, because I don't really care. I'll be like, look all the cool stuff we did in a live stream.
You should make like a Friday afternoon happy hour for devs to just kind of shoot the breeze.
Water cooler, hang out.
Yep.
Let's do that. That's actually a really great idea. That's a really, really great idea.
I love that idea. I can shoot shots fired all of my ideas across the bow about how the browser will be dead within 5 years, and people don't really want your UI. They just want to get access to the content they're looking for, and how advertising is just following us into the agentic era and what that smells like. But we don't have time for that.
It's just going to be the chatbot chaos again, where everybody goes anti-UI and then it goes back.
Yeah, that's valid.
I think they'll always want UI. I just think we don't need people to make it anymore.
Well, I think about the AI prompts, right? Like, if I could go to my bank and type in what's my balance, and then I could type in make a transaction to Tessa for $25. Well, I don't need a UI. But
that's so valid.
We should earmark this.
Yeah. Let's come back to this. Let's come back to this conversation. I don't know if y'all are taking time off over Christmas, but I'm actually doing like some of these fun events over Christmas, because so many clients and everything else are like checked out and not doing business. And so I'm like all for the fun events over these next couple of weeks. So let me know if you're feeling you want to talk about it, or if anyone else is just watching. I mean, we have 28 viewers. They're probably working and just like on their Friday checkout mode, right? Like it's the end of the week and it's almost the holidays. We'll just listen to this live stream.
And I'm into it. I got new toys for Christmas, like the Omi, which records and transcribes conversations. The best part is you can develop your own apps for it, and there's one that will let you know when you're using bias in your language. It's
That's
like
cool.
Big Brother for your cause.
For your everything, your humanitarianism. Is that a word?
We
Did I just
are
make that
on
up?
the cusp of
So
a
we're
new world.
we're on the cusp of AI telling us how to speak to each other.
To be honest,
Ooh,
some
that's
of us
scary.
need that.
Some of us
Some of us do.
absolutely do. I have a coworker who has started using ChatGPT every time she's going to send a message, and rather than her, you'll see her start typing and then stop. She goes to ChatGPT, pastes in her message, and then copies that out and pastes it every
And
time.
nicify, as I call it.
Yep.
So
Let's talk about
Tessa,
AgentQL.
let's hang out over
Yeah.
the holidays and talk smack about the coming revolution. In the meantime,
Let's do it. Let's do it.
so what's your biggest challenge when it comes to following along with all of these conversations and staying on top of trends right now, Tessa?
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I think we answered that question, but you didn't.
Yeah. Good call out there. Okay. So let me just actually speak to a client, or not really. Yeah. Let me just speak to an actual example because I think it'd be really valuable. So I have a client. The client is called ArcJet. So for anyone who is managing a modern JS stack, yeah, absolutely. If you're managing a modern JS stack, I would strongly recommend checking it out. They are a security as code platform. And there's definitely a different sort of methodology on how this founder looks at and thinks about security. And so when my clients come in, we go through this market insights, competitive analysis, just a bunch of different type of research to sort of compare and contrast. Where does your dev tool stand against your competitors? A lot of the founder pain points are their fear. In this case, this is not his fear, but in some clients' cases, there is a fear around competitors, right, and where that plays in. And then also on that developer experience, where does that developer experience stand from one tool to another? So I've started standardizing sort of a scoring system for developer experience on dev tools. So as I am diving into this client, right, the prime use cases, which is how I think about it, is like, yeah, tools can do great things. They've got features. It's great. But why? Why does someone actually want to use those tools, which is how I go about sort of that go-to-market approach. And so for ArcJet specifically, there's a primary opportunity in the AI and the ML ecosystem, as we were just talking about, with endpoint or API endpoint abuse, right? So you're building an agentic type of a app, whatever it might be, and you're just getting, hit with all this extra traffic. Maybe you all of a sudden go viral and you were just like, hey, check out this cool thing I made, right? And so it can help with a lot of that type of stuff. And so outside of that use case, the other use case we identified was new SaaS applications. So anyone who is building a new SaaS and they need to just really have just everything perfectly lined up for that launch. And with that, there's a project called next-forge.com if anyone wants to check it out. And that project has ArcJet integrated and it is getting a lot of traction. And so we're like, wow, this is definitely a use case above and beyond the fact that when you are building on a SaaS application, like you don't have a security team, you don't have all these resources around security. So it's a great case to bring in ArcJet as that kind of early stage. So they're, I would say, mostly focused in sort of the startup, but they do and could definitely be functional for enterprise. But in most cases, they start bringing in big security teams and things when you get to that level. So digressing with all that, I know that felt like, why are we talking about this? But I'll tell you why we're talking about this. So those two use cases have pain points. So the pain points being API endpoint abuse, bot protection. I have honestly, I have a Notion doc that's like, I bet there's 75 different phrases to validate or invalidate for both of these use cases because they both have different sets of pain points. Those pain points are the conversations where you can actually catch a buyer when they're ready, right? So as devs, and I know the two of you can relate or kind of share commentary on this, but as developers, we're like, hey, we have a problem. And if we're going to go seek out a tool for a problem, we are most often than not want to try to use that tool right freaking now. Like, I want to figure out this problem right now. I want to start experimenting with these tools. I need a solution. And maybe you're not buying a solution right away. Maybe there is a conversation there, but you're still in that mode of trying to solve that pain point. And so if we can figure out and find the opportunities at which these types of conversations are taking place, then we can tap into that moment where we can drive engagement right when a developer is in that mindset of wanting to make a decision or to try a tool. Does that make sense? So that's where my head's at.
I see. So you want to identify opportunities to solve this pain point for people in that moment as they are they're exhibiting indicators of trying to solutionize.
Exactly. But authentically, right? Like we do things in DevRel, being able to, as a developer, come in and be like, oh, here's, such and such you could look at. Here's something else. Oh, maybe you should check out this project that ArcJet's already a part of. Or maybe you should check out, um, you know, like you said, Reddit. You can't just roll in and be like, go over to, this tool or this product, but you can be authentic about how you sort of present that in front of them. And so that's what I'm curious about. In my day-to-day, I'm constantly having to sort of manually use other tools that do some social listening and some other stuff. And I just don't have a tool that really helps me narrow all this down. And so that's when I started thinking about, how can AgentQL do this with its scraping opportunities and all the data that it can grab? Is there a use case here to find these dev pain points?
I would also add that you could probably, and you'll have to forgive me, I haven't looked in depth about AgentQL. You could probably either use AgentQL or GitHub's APIs on their issues pages,
That'd be perfect
and
places to scrape.
target certain frameworks and things that you are trying to enable developers within, right?
Oh, love that.
If you had a dev tool that makes Next easier, jump on the GitHub Issues API for their project or their repo IDs and find issues that you're honing in on a solution for.
Yeah. Yeah, that I think exactly that, right? So it's like, how do I, and this is the path and the journey that I am on, how do I do this easier? Can I, and Chris, you know this all too well, because we've been trying to prototype and sort of pull some things together, but it's like, how and where could I use AgentQL for this? So Rachel, you started like keyboarding a little bit. So I don't know if you've got some like early thoughts on what I shared, but yeah, I'm honestly just like, hey, what could we do? And just experiment and see what AgentQL could help us provide.
Well, I'll share one way of solving it using the tools that I'm helping build. I'll just go ahead and share AgentQL's playground here because it's visual. I was thinking, where's a great place to engage with people that's high profile? Like, what are some of the challenges? Like, give me an example. This is, by the way, like, hang on a minute. This is what the query is. You can use it for automation too, but that requires me to open up the SDK. Playground really only works for fetching data. But we can get into using it to submit forms and things. But anyway, like in this case, I've written articles and a little array thing, and now I'm going to ask it to fetch the data. It's going to create just a little list of the articles. Actually, I can do one better. Let's do title, URL, author. Yes, that one.
I like the autocorrect.
Yeah, we've been finessing this for a while. So we fetch the data and it'll populate down here. But the interesting thing is you describe what you're looking for. So it's gone out and it's found, a bestiary of exotic hadrons. It's done a good job of listing everything on the page. Basically turns the page into an API endpoint because not everybody has GitHub's endpoints.
Yep.
In this case, there's a fun thing we can do. If we put a little parentheses here, we can add a prompt. So we could add something here like, what is a smell that somebody might be having a problem that one of your clients can help with? How would you, like, when you're searching through different posts, what's your criterion? Something about security, something about like, starting them on a repo with, baked in security protocols and DDoS protection. What do you look for?
Yep. Let me go pull up a doc I have. So there's a variety of different things. Let's see.
Perhaps rate limiting or something of the sort. I know that's an ArcJet feature.
I know. I was just so like, I have so many different options, right? And then this is one of the pain points, right? Is that I have so many that sort of come to fruition as opportunities. And then it's like, how do I validate or invalidate each of those various opportunities? So just to start with one, we can go something of like, API endpoint abuse, high versus sell bill ends up falling into that same vein, which high versus sell bill can definitely bring up a whole slew of different sort of reasons and rationality. But ArcJet actually is a major sort of resolution for that pain point, because oftentimes the reason that happens is it's, again, some sort of API or an endpoint abuse or whatever it might be, unless all of a sudden you just like suddenly went like insanely viral, right? So yeah.
Here you go. How to use a fortune with one bad click. So what I did was I wrote posts that feature security, rate limiting, API endpoint abuse, high AWS bills, and other issues with abuse that news sites fall prey to. And I just passed that with parentheses. And
Oh, wow.
AgentQL used this to just select things that kind of sound like that. Let's see how good it did.
Rachel, I got to tell you,
I'll
that's
lose a fortune.
cool.
Wait, what?
Your tool is really cool. As a developer, that's really neat.
Dude, I love AgentQL. That's why I'm like, yes.
I'm curious.
I have so many questions about being able to use it programmatically and so forth, but I'll hold on that.
So one of the challenges we were talking about when we first came in, there's like the public web. And this playground that I'm showing you, it's basically a recreation for, we have this API REST point. And the API REST point is great for extracting data from the public web, as I call it. It's the stuff that is created and left in the public for people to access. So let's see, boop, boop. We're going down to the REST API. Here it is. It only returns data. You've got to, you basically pass it a query and you pass it a URL. You can set this up with Zapier, by the way, if you're a Zapier true a lover and you don't want to set up like a cron job somewhere. So anyway, we're also testing out a feature that lets you schedule these. So there's a programmatic way to do exactly what you're looking at here. And you can go to places like, I love that dev.to doesn't require you to be logged in to see things that are important. For instance, maybe dev help? Nope. Where would be a good place in dev.to to look for these challenges? Ooh, AWS.
So honestly, I would say they're not thinking about security. And so that's the interesting thing, right? Is that oftentimes when we get into these scenarios, we're like, oh, let's go listen for security. Let's go listen for, and it's like, no, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about like, I have an AI agentic, agent and I'm getting endpoint abuse type of thing, right? And so when I search for security, it's wrong. And so that's why I set up those use cases. And so I think in this case, it'd be hanging out in like AI and ML ecosystem, then also hanging out in sort of the new SaaS ecosystem. But that's a whole dynamic of where those devs at, right? And so I think for the dev.to thing, I would tap into sort of a very much the modern JS stack because that's that's where their product serves. But then anything around sort of that, kind of that abuse, high bill, some of those other things that I mentioned, which makes this tricky, right? Is like, where do you actually find this? Because the categories, if you want to follow the normal categories that are crystal clear to you, great, but you're not going to end up getting the results that I find when I go down the pain point route, if that makes sense. So that's why this is so tricky.
Well, that's one of the reasons why humans are still doing this job and we haven't just handed it over to AI.
Exactly.
I was thinking AWS would be a great place to search for this. Now, if you use the SDK, you can actually set it up to use pagination. So you could, for instance, there's a little example for how to deal with infinite scrolling. So you could just keep going until like you return 5 results from this.
Yeah.
Like automating AWS cost management reports with Lambda. This might be a good place to go in and see like, is this really about cost management reports, or is this actually about like setting alerts to tell you when you're going over? And this might be a place where you might pop in, and even if you don't say anything, it might be a good place to gather a use case from, like this is how people are currently solving for it and learning what their language is here.
Yep, exactly.
Monitoring AWS costs is essential for keeping budgets in check.
Yep.
I bet you that like you're speaking their language if you incorporate that. So yeah,
oops, sorry, you keep going.
So you can just pass URLs and run the REST API on them. And you could even do some exploration, like do a little Google search and then dive on each of the URLs that is returned that seems to line up. Like anything where you pass a URL, get things back. You can either do things with those things, like follow those links and run another search there kind of recursively, or you can just like cancel early and return the list right there. So that's one way that you could use AgentQL for this.
Hey,
yeah,
Rick,
I like that.
My developer brain is spinning as I'm watching this, and I'm wondering, have you guys thought about using AgentQL's design against REST APIs. And what I mean when I say that is rewriting the JSON format so that you could effectively say, hey, I want this format from this other API, and being a mapper. Because you have a very powerful semi-ORM tool if you were to do something like that.
It just works with HTML right now, I'm afraid.
I know, but the way you were showing the mapping of JSON from that pure HTML, it wouldn't be hard to take what you have and do that.
You mean basically create like a transformer for API endpoints?
Exactly.
There's got to be a tool that does it already.
There's a few. They're very expensive.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah, you have a market opportunity right there for sure.
What are these tools and what makes them expensive?
There's one that I'm relatively familiar with called Vendia it's effectively designed to be a dynamic ETL, right? And it's more of that ETL historic design. What I'm thinking about is in the context, if you're comparing multiple different APIs to integrate with in your software and you have a data structure, you might be able to use what you're doing mixed with a data structure and cut at the knees integrations so that I, as a developer, don't have to think about that integration. I think about my data structure and I say, AgentQL, figure this out and post that data to this endpoint. So sorry to derail. It's just I see a lot of power in what you've got.
I'll take that idea back to the team in the next triage session.
I love it. Developer feedback back to the organization. Chris, I'm very excited that you're excited about this because I think this is and some of the stuff that we've been talking about. So Chris has been helping me sort of dive into like prototyping and how can I build tools to make my life easier for my clients and things that I'm doing. And so his excitement means I'm like, yes, we get to play with this in one of my prototypes.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think question for you. What you made a comment and I didn't address it because, it was like some people could catch on to it and some people might not. And so I just sort of let it go and I'll allude to it now. But you made a comment about publicly available information, right? And I think one of the big things with developers is that yes, they can go hang out in public spaces and some of them do so and they're happy to do that, or they hide behind a, anonymous profile on like a Reddit, right? But I think that where the kind of guts of some of the most meaningful conversations, when you really get down into a deep use case in this, where I'm talking about, right, AI and ML sort of applications, they're using modern JS for their front end. They're likely on Vercel, Netlify, or Fly.io. Very sort of, I've got a tight criteria starting to be created there. We're talking Discord communities. We're talking like private forums that require a login. Can and has AgentQL done anything? And Chris, I already see your tech mind just chugging along. Well, can we like use user accounts we create to get in and scrape Discord? Like, I don't know. What options do we have for these private spaces?
I would throw a curveball just for simplicity. Let's think about like LinkedIn, right? If I wanted to scrape my LinkedIn feed, how would I do it?
Sure.
Because that's an authenticated space. We're all familiar with LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So this is possible, but the trick is, so AgentQL was originally designed, the word agent doesn't stand for user agent, actually stands for AI agent. The idea was people out there are going to build personal agents that are going to behave in their stead. Sort of like I've always wanted to create a clone of myself that I can delegate work to, like a mini me or like an evil twin. Or maybe I'd be the evil twin and they'd be the good twin. I'd give them a conscience and I would be the one that would need to be stopped. But point is, so the idea is AgentQL itself doesn't know how to break open any doors. It's a parser and a query language. It's a smart parser. It's damn smart. Yep. But if you want to use it behind like a paywall or a login, you're going to have to use it as yourself. And you can do that. There's actually, you can save and load authenticated states because it uses Playwright. And with Playwright for testing, you need to save and load authenticated states sometimes, or else how would you ever test anything behind a login screen? But you do the same thing. You just add your credentials into your script, the URL, email, password, etc. And this is just a regular old Python script that's got some, it's the AgentQL wrapper with Playwright. It's straightforward, but you can use AgentQL as logged in. I prefer, rather than having my credentials in a text file, well, a Python file somewhere on my computer, which makes me feel a little, I actually prefer to use an open browser tab. We have a guide for that using AgentQL, how to open, connect to a browser in existing browsers. So I'll actually have AgentQL accessing a developer browser that I have running locally as kind of like AI with me as opposed to instead of me. So this way, it's an actual human being at the helm. And that's how I like to do it. It also, I would say this is from a bot protection and anti-bot evasion situation. This is also the use case that's going to get flagged the least by, like if you tried to run AgentQL in an AWS server, like everyone knows if a login is coming from these AWS IPs, it's a bot. And you're going to end up with a bunch of scripts that fail. You're not fooling anybody. The interesting thing, though, is
you can't use a VPN in that case.
Well, we can also set up proxies too. Like we have, let's see, beep, 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 logging in, caching. There are guides for all of this, like logging in, caching. I know I'm bouncing on it quickly, but you have to understand, I don't actually want to edit any scripts that involve any personally identifiable information on screen. I get very cagey about this. Like I haven't got my pattern down that good. So oh, here we go. Enabling proxies. There's also like you can rotate browser headers. This is all fairly standard. We even have this stealth mode that you can enable. We took over an abandoned Python project because it needed a home. But my favorite is just like the fuzzing the behavior. Like, believe it or not, like I have learned so much about how to detect what's a human and what's not. And for AI to pass as human, it actually has to get worse. It has to be less efficient. For instance,
more than that, it has to make mistakes.
And so it's like after you think about it a while, you're like, oh, well, I guess we should just use humans for that. But no, I'm kidding. Like no mouse moves in a straight line. It's always like there's a little arc, like no human moves with mathematical precision. So you end up randomizing things. Instead of using Playwright's fill, you end up using press sequentially to individually do the key up, key down of all the, it takes longer, it's less efficient, but it behaves more like a human. And AgentQL uses the accessibility tree to understand like the layout of the entire page and perform these automations, like filling out forms, etc. So it does pass as a human quite well. It can be your best evil friend twin open in your tab if you so choose. And I could keep going because there's actually something I feel very strongly about that I want to rag on.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I have recently gotten really, really cheesed off about, how back in the day we were all told that information wanted to be free. And I was an artist, so I was like, people still need to get paid for their work. And now what has happened is I feel like everything has evolved to be platforms are king. Information doesn't want to be free, it wants to be monetized, but only by large companies. Individual monetization, screw you. Only monetization for the company that provides the platform. I've worked for these companies. So
LinkedIn.
That's kind of where LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, they control the platform. They control how much you get paid. YouTube. And so when you look at something like, look at this, Etsy, if you just use the playground, it says you've been blocked because the playground, it's a demo. It's not using your IP address. And Etsy, I'm so surprised by this. It's a marketplace and it's anti-botted to the hilt. But I also thought marketplaces were there so that people could sell things. So why is it be like, I have a question, like, who is this serving? Is it
I'm
serving the lister or the company, this platform?
So I'll throw a different thought at you. So there was very recently a guy who, and obviously a different model here, but on Spotify, he had posted empty songs and he had written bots that were hitting his songs, and he was actually getting paid for these empty songs. And so if I was so inclined to sell on Etsy and use bots to, heart my items, I could, in theory, push my items up in the marketplace. And so I can understand why they have it set up this way.
I really don't get it either.
Share because I want to put my API key in and I can't unshare. Can anybody else share? Like, is there any way to kick me out?
I can stop sharing yours and then turn it back on like that.
Okay, sweet. I'll be right with you.
Yeah, no problem. Honestly, that makes me wonder too. I mean, is it an infrastructure cost thing? But at the end of the day, I mean, why would you care about that when the idea of somebody buying something likely outweighs the infrastructure cost for that scraping?
I can only think that it comes down to people gaming something or stealing information like scraping.
Like inequality of sellers, maybe. They have
Right.
maybe they have like an actual like sort of, I don't know much about Etsy, but maybe they have kind of like a seller protection agreement, right? Where like we promise to have an infrastructure that offers equal, I don't know, right?
Well, I think about like eBay. eBay does this where they will, if something's really, if I've posted an item and it's really, really hot, where it's getting a lot of views and a lot of watchers, it's going to re-rank in your searches. I know that for a fact. I don't know how Etsy does it, but I know eBay ranks based on watchers and views. And so if I wrote a bot that was going in and hitting my items, I'm going to hit my items in the search, and they have paid services for that, premium service for that on
That's
eBay.
it.
They wouldn't want you to use bots on it.
Yep. That's probably it then. It has to be something like that, where there's some like level of marketing services that they provide to help you elevate your items if you want to pay for it. So if they let someone else do it.
That's the only thing.
Corporate greed.
I have a thing to share. If y'all, I don't know, Tessa, if you can have me share it again. I've tried to share screen, but it's not doing anything.
It's just because I turned it off. So now I can turn it right back on.
So there's an AgentQL Chrome debugger, which once again, like it's basically running AgentQL there in your browser. So you can still use it on a page. You don't have to like spin up a service with a REST API and use a bunch of proxies. Oh my God. Like if you're just on a page, I do this all the time. And I just want to be like, let's see. Let me make one quickly. Ornaments. Trees only. All right. Price, name. All right, fetch the data, show me what we got. This is something, it's for debugging your queries. That's the idea, is that this is what this is used for. But it's also pretty handy in my day-to-day. This is terrible looking, the piggy in the blanket. I feel like it looks like a sandworm or something worse. And I feel like whoever made this needs to have a talk with somebody. I know it's the UK, but people, there's no sense of shame here. But anyway, it runs locally. It did find it found the handmade pig and blanket Christmas tree decoration. Oh my God. It found the first one too, because I forgot to put in the little boop, boop to indicate, please do that. But you know what? Check it out. This is also, because this one it will fetch elements too. I can do the add to basket button. And you could create, for instance, a script that would go out here and purchase all of the tree ornaments for you or add them to your basket. You'll see in a moment. And you could run it locally. So it would automate all of those things. in your case, you could, for instance, find where the conversations you want to have are happening. And you could create, for instance, a script that opens up a bunch of tabs so that you can jump in and see which ones you want to respond to. So you could power up a script that visits like dev.to, Hacker News, finds all the articles that look important, automatically opens them in a new tab, and if you really wanted to get fun with it, you could like have some boilerplate response that you're generating with Claude. I don't use ChatGPT, and then you come in and you kind of like, yes, no, let me edit it. Always human in the loop there. To make it a little easier for you to find those conversations that you want to have, and you could just run it like every morning, and it would hunt down and find those conversations for you. But yeah, here it's found all of these buttons.
Yep, it has.
Ta-da!
I kind of figured that there was definitely something here, which is why I was like, hey, come and hang with me, because I want to start experimenting with it. I think that's a good call out too. Plus if I'm utilizing the Chrome extension, I mean, locally, I could just start experimenting, right? So I can start testing out, is this actually accurate? Can this work? Can I go into Discord communities that I'm already an authenticated user for? Because I'm not looking to go in and be shady, right? I'm not going to go and be an annoying, like,
you just don't have 5 hours every day to go through every conversation.
Thank you. Exactly. That's it. And so I want to find the conversations that are going to be the authentic ones and the valuable ones to actually go and engage with.
Hey, Rachel.
And that takes some prompt engineering, but you can do it.
Quick question for you. Is there, and this is AgentQL question, from a development standpoint, can I say, give me the query selector for like these buttons so that I have the array of the elements?
Yes. I know you're thinking.
I know I'm getting you to show off the products. I'm sorry.
No, this is beautiful. That's the whole point, right? Like, that's why I did it. I'm like, how can we shed light on really cool dev tools while also solving problems, right? This is how AgentQL gets to shine.
So
another great way in contrary to developer engagement.
What I'm wondering is if there's an avenue to use AgentQL to basically empower automation engineers so that they can write their automations more quickly, sort of an automation cursor AI. Tessa, if you've gotten to play with cursor yet, sort of an extension to help automation engineers.
I'm sorry, I'm hunting
You're
down.
fine. I put you on the spot, and you're feeling the effects of a live demo, right? So
it can find a CSS path too, and you've given me an idea for another example. No, we have an XPath example. Both thing you can do. You do. So the best thing is you're looking at this, and for dynamically constantly updating content, absolutely you want to run a new request. But those do cost. You do end up spending, like, I think 0.015 cent per API in the pay-as-you-go plan. But the point is it saves you a lot of time. Now, you might be thinking, but Rachel Lee, I want to use this to run tests. Actually, tests is a form of automation. Playwright's out there. This is useful because instead of having to remember what the data attribute or ID for a submit button on a form is, you can just be like, get the submit button, click the submit button, and it can really make self-healing tests. Heal.dev uses AgentQL to do this. But the interesting thing is you can use something like XPath, DOM path here, this little package. It can find the XPath of the item that you found. You can store it locally in a cache and just use that until the thing you're trying to do breaks. Fall back to using AgentQL, and if it's still broken, then X out and bring a human back into the loop to see what's happened. So you can create like a self-healing automation in that way. And it's cheaper.
I love this. There's a lot of power in this, in a totally different vertical of empowering AI or AEs. So I love it.
So you asked a question and I was on this thread over here. Let's move over to the thread that you were on.
Let's do it.
What did you ask? I didn't hear you.
I was asking about how to get the query selector, which you've effectively accomplished with the XPath.
Excellent. I'm so glad. And we have a JavaScript SDK and a Python SDK. Who here prefers JavaScript? Raise your little hand.
I mean, probably. Though I really want to nerd out on Python and Rails. So apparently I just need to like, become a millionaire so I can just learn code all day.
Can't you do Rails on Python? Like Rails isn't unique to Ruby, right?
That's valid. I should say I want to learn Ruby and Rails in the culmination of understanding Ruby's language, because my guest from my live stream a few days ago, like he just nerded out on Rails or on Ruby. And I'm like, okay, I'm really intrigued by his interest with Ruby. So,
Ruby was the first programming language I learned that helped me understand JavaScript, because all the JavaScript books were written for programmers, not for designers.
Interesting.
One thing I would call out as well is you don't want to do Ruby without Rails. Is
That's
my
what he
understanding?
said. Yeah. He says a very difficult language, very expressive. And as we were chatting about it, I was like, okay, but it makes me want to like understand it more because of the way he explained it and how it is a hard to, I guess a good analogy, right? Like an out of control child. And so then Rails like brings that sort of out of control child into a more controlled environment per se. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but
Is JavaScript the child that is now a penguin or something like that, where you just mutate everything?
penguins are cute. So
there you go.
I feel like I always thought of Ruby as being really beautiful. Also, we can generate queries for you. If you're just not sure, you can write a long prompt and it'll create one for you. But it's a trick. I prefer to write my own queries because I'm a nerd. And this is, by the way, how I fill out CFPs when they're like, give us all of your socials. It's like, hang on, let me go to my personal site again and run this query. I'm so lazy.
You're a developer.
I wouldn't say you're lazy, because you're engineering automation to avoid laziness.
Exactly. You're a developer. That's what we do.
It's true.
We're lazy.
I think that Ruby's actually quite beautiful as a language. And maybe that's because I study Japanese and there's so much about Ruby that just, it feels like poetry to me. But I would say you shouldn't build a website with Ruby without Rails, the same way you shouldn't build a website with JavaScript without like Next.js. Like, why would you do that? It's not built for that. Don't do that. Stop. HTML does not have a programming language associated with it. You can use JavaScript, you can use PHP, you could use Ruby, but you probably want to use a framework, because otherwise it's very painful. There's a lot of boilerplate you're going to have to slog through. But I always appreciated the Rails pipeline. That was just amazing stuff.
I have this major struggle as I'm sort of like expanding and like rejuvenating and kind of diving back into different technologies and things. And and I've talked to Chris about this at length. I was like the engineer that like understood the entire system. So frameworks to me are like, no, why? Although I did like Bootstrap. That was a framework, but I understood how Bootstrap functioned. So I think like, and maybe again, I'm sort of aging myself, but like I didn't have frameworks. I didn't even have like courses or free code camp or anything. I had W3 schools and books, like actual books and like source code, And so I spent so much time investing in understanding the entire system that I think that it's an actual fundamental, it's actually like a sort of, I'm trying to think of the word for it. It's kind of like at a disadvantage for me because I don't want to use frameworks because of that. But then I realize that it's going to take me 100 million times longer to do something if I don't do a framework.
So let's unpack a couple different pieces of that, right? That's a lot. Understanding the language, any language, whether it's JavaScript, whether it's Python, Ruby, what have you, until we get to COBOL. No one wants to understand COBOL. But
hey, my mom programmed COBOL. You take that back.
Yeah. Rachel's mom wants to understand it.
But, understanding the foundations of any language is key, right? I've been doing JavaScript for, 17 years, and I'm still learning some new isms about it, right?
Yeah.
But you know, as you work in these languages and you get nondescript errors, right? You know, I had a junior dev reach out to me 2 weeks ago. They saw an issue in React, and you know, they're just scratching their heads because they've never seen the engine level error that was coming
Mhm.
up. And they
Right.
had Googled and Googled and Googled, but they couldn't find it in relation to React.
Right.
And so, you know, those foundational skills, they're key for debugging, troubleshooting, and just in general having a better understanding of what the framework is doing.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I mean, obviously, you can't be good at everything and you can't know everything and you can't know the entire system these days because everything is far more complicated than it used to be. But I think on top of that too, it's you know, it's things have evolved and grown and we've built amazing things that have expanded. But I do think that that is sort of like, and actually we talked about this on my 99 Dev Problems live stream today. Like we actually talked about his recommendation and that he doesn't think that junior devs should be utilizing sort of like the Chat GPT or the Claude or even some of the AI tools unless, Rachel, it's like the case where you talked about in Cursor, right? Where you're like, wait a minute, tell me what is this doing so I can understand how to understand it, right? But his example was like, if we have junior devs using these agentic type of prompting to get programming answers, they are not going to fundamentally understand how to work through bigger problems because they're just sort of patching each thing that they're doing.
But we've always had script kiddies.
Yeah, but they learn. So, you know, 10 years ago, Stack Overflow was the playground for that, right? And you would copy and
True.
paste things. But, you know, you start to understand it as you copy and paste because you copy
Exactly.
and paste, it doesn't work, and then you go to another one and then you wash, rinse, repeat. With
Exactly.
AI, it's just spitting out the solution, and it's effectively, you know, kids asking someone else to do their homework. It's the equivalent.
But then they're not going to become programmers because eventually they'll hit the end of that and they won't be able to get beyond it.
It's interesting you say that, and there's a whole spiel I can get on, and Tessa and I have talked about this a little bit. But you know, I was in a discussion a couple weeks ago, and myself and a few high senior folks were talking about this, and you know, one of them said, "Does it matter?" at the end, and it really bothered me in the moment.
It matters.
But it does it?
I think it does.
Well, hang on. Most businesses want output, and those businesses don't necessarily understand what's going on the technical. And so at a certain point, if you can ask AI to generate you the code, and then you go through this vicious cycle of generating fresh code, does it matter if you understand it? I believe it does, and you believe it does. But there are a lot of businesses who may not believe that as we go into this AI boom.
I totally agree. And I think that you bring up a good point there because they're not going to care about that developer individually, right? They're not going to care about their future. Do they have the fundamentals they need to be successful in the future? They're a junior dev. And it's not that junior devs are not valuable. It's just the reality of companies, right? Companies are not going to put a lot of stake or sort of investment into that individual until it makes sense to do so, right? So I there is a good point there of like, when does it matter? Because what will happen is when they run out of their opportunities of using AI and creating the new code, they'll just lose their job or they'll be terminated, right? And then they'll be forced to figure out what happened here and how did this go. My wondering is what happens to that developer? Do they maintain being a developer? What was their education to begin with above all of that, right? Do they give up?
Out.
Right. That's so true. We'll find out.
But there's also like, just as there's a class of people who will make messes and not be able to find their way out of them, there'll be a class of people who carry the tools with them to resolve those messes. I am able to spin up with Cursor pretty much any GitHub repo and see what's happening, what's wrong. You know, like I love Cursor because it allows me to talk with the code base and talk about like, well, what's this doing? And if I wanted to achieve this, how would I do that? And it's like talking to a big sister.
Yeah.
Big sister doesn't always have all the answers, but she gets you most of the way there. And if you're still struggling, you probably should go talk to like your boss's boss. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I see this as like raising the floor for developers. There will be people who are just going to be like, bap, 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 bap. And you know what? Go use Wix. People, you can make beautiful sites with Wix. You do not need to pay a developer to do that anymore. You do not. There are perfectly wonderful standardized systems that are going to make you cookie cutter sites like no tomorrow, and they'll be accessible too. We have built that world for you. You are welcome. Now we need to go find new jobs. But there will be people who are going to come in and be like, I really love building things. And I kind of took it as far as I could get with ChatGPT at school. And then I got Cursor, or I got whatever it is that people are going to use to learn in the future. And it's really leveled up my game. And now I'm able to build like entire apps on my own, or I'm able to get those contracts to go fix things that people built themselves, but they're broken and now they need to scale and they don't know how because they were just good enough to get in trouble, which is all you need. I think it might change how we think about development, and it might get us back into that freelancer merry band of men attitude that honestly we had for a period of time and then lost as everything got consolidated, where you need a team with principals and juniors, and they have a system and a bar and an interview process, and it'll become more like, what do you like doing? What do you like nerding out about? Are you a fire starter or are you a fixer? Come join the crowd.
Oh man, I love that.
Yeah. I mean, the industry needs a renaissance, and I think we're on the cusp of it, right? Yep. I would call out, tools like Cursor are missing some fundamental, just to go back a second, right? Looking at Cursor can interact with my code base and it can interact with the web. And then you have other tools like Amazon Q that can interact with your AWS instance and see the shape of your resources, thinking about Terraform. But when you contrast that, right, Cursor can't tell me any of that information right now. It'd be a fantastic plugin. Hey, Cursor, if you're listening, that'd be a great plugin. The ability to say, hey, go look at my other Git repositories would be a great plugin. I spoke to this in my job, where if we could use Cursor to scan our 600 repositories and say, write me some code that looks like some of our other code, that's where it just kind of starts to really blossom.
Or you can have like a state of, depending on what you're doing, right? But like in the line of work I was in, I did a lot of like open source software websites, right? And so it's for General Mills, and I've done it for agencies, whatever, right? And so I'm constantly like utilizing sort of the same like code base of resources I like in that case of whatever that open source project might be. And so it allow you to sort of like set a developer norm of like, here's how I want to operate, here's what I want to use, that type of thing. And I think
like
that
a very meta style guide.
Yes, exactly. I haven't installed Cursor. Cursor delete for just a couple minutes. I haven't installed Cursor yet because I just have amazing client stuff to do that I have been doing this week, and it's on the number 6 of my list every single day, and it just keeps getting pushed back. So I'll probably be coding tomorrow. But
if you have 5 minutes and your laptop, I don't care if you're sitting on the toilet, go ahead and just install it. You will immediately be hooked. You immediately are like, oh, this is nice. Oh, it's like you've suddenly gotten into the first class section of the plane. And you sit down and it's like, how does Prosecco get in my hand? And then when the 15-day free trial is up, you're like, no, you take my money now. Take it. And it's like, I need the review. I'm too sloppy. I am very sloppy. The reason why I chickened out software engineering is because linters weren't invented fast enough. Everyone's resume says I'm detail oriented. That is a lie. I sweat the small important stuff, but I forgot that period. I'm sorry. I didn't. Yeah. Sorry about that. Didn't know. Sorry. My bad. Everything crashed. Yeah. That was not the autism blessing I received. I received different blessings, and noticing when punctuation is slightly off on a page without having to read it first, not one of them.
I get that. I can totally understand that. So I've been waiting because I realize it is quick, and I know it's just great. And I actually have the download file, but whenever I go and use a new dev tool, well, you know this, right? As I had sort of worked with AgentQL while you were coming into the amazingness of all that is that I'll do screen recordings of me doing something. And so I'm like, okay, I'm like, this is cool. I'm like, what the fridge is that? That doesn't make any sense. And I can't imagine I'm going to get that kind of an experience. But I think the experience I am going to get is, oh my gosh, how did this Prosecco get in my hand? And I'm going to be very excited about it. And I love sharing those. And I think there's just a lot of like passion to them. And so I'm like waiting for the moment where I can, have my mic and I guess have my water and my recording is on and I'm ready to write and say all the things about the experience as I dive in. So maybe that's why I'm delaying it, but
Oh yeah. Do you want to stop delaying it and do the thing?
yeah, I mean, we can. We are also going to, yeah, actually, let's do it. We could just do it on here. We are going to do a live stream tomorrow. I need to go edit the invite, but if anyone is listening and you are over in the Dev Hub, let me pop it at the bottom again for a little bit. The ticker is just a little annoying. It kind of distracts your eye. We're having a live stream similar to this tomorrow that Ryan Furrer is going to host, and it's actually on Cursor. And so I haven't edited the title yet, but we're going to be diving into Cursor, so that'll be fun too. So I don't know, I'm down if you want to. We could share the Prosecco together. And then I'm sure Chris, feel like I'm just going to sort of ramble a little bit and see if Chris comes back. Cause he loves Cursor and he's like, Tessa, install it. And I just haven't done it yet. So
I guess I'm very bullish on AI. I'm genuinely like, yeah, the web has failed in so many ways and platforms have all the power and everything's always failing towards this pyramid. I am happy to just bring the wrecking ball, knock it down and start over again, even though it will eventually end up in the same shape. I prefer it when all the Legos are across the floor. That's my happy place in this cycle. Let's do that.
I love that. Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
Oh, it is.
No worries, you're back.
Good. You are back. So we were just talking about Cursor when you were gone and installing it and how I haven't gotten to installing it yet because I've actually been doing client work. But tomorrow, Ryan in the community, you've met Ryan in a couple DX audits that we've done. He's actually hosting an audit, but it's more of like, hey, come hang. We're just going to talk about it. And he's doing it on Cursor.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I haven't edited the title. We just logistically figured that out this morning. But I think it's going to be fun. But then Rachel was like, but you could also do it now on the live stream. So what do we think?
Do it. Do it. Do it.
All right. Should we I have not installed Cursor before, so we're gonna do it.
You should take over.
Yeah, I will. I'll turn this one off, I think. There
It keeps asking me if I want to install Copilot. I'm like, no. Why would I? I have you.
So, the biggest complaint I would give about Cursor is that it's a whole IDE rather than a plugin. And, Tessa and I were talking about this of it's likely because of the level of access that they need for their chat bar and some of their interface elements, that VS Code doesn't allow a plugin access to because it's just VS Code.
Right. Any hunch, any insights on that? Oh, wait, I had already downloaded it.
I think everybody wants to create a platform and not a plugin because it's easier to charge for a product than it is to charge for access with a plugin. I also think you get a level of control over the UI by making a fork of VS Code that you wouldn't get if you had to use the plugin system. So I suspect it's probably 50%, more or less of each of those two factors. It's a lot harder to get people to switch from a plugin to an IDE than to just start them in the IDE.
I don't know. I've been using WebStorm, right, since 2013. I love WebStorm. Well, I have all of my settings. I have all of my theme, everything, right? And if you tell me who's been using WebStorm now for, 11 years, if you tell me, hey, you got to change IDE to have access to AI, because let's be real, JetBrains AI is not great. So if you told me I have to totally give up all my hotkeys, all of my everything to move over to a VS Code that I have to pay for, right? It's a hill to climb.
Well, if there was a migration assistant, that could be worthwhile. There's also the question of how productive, you're trading one kind of productivity, remembering where everything is, for another. And lastly, you just pointed out something. You are so loyal. You are so loyal to WebStorm. And I think that's the bet that Cursor is making, is that people are going to be so loyal to Cursor. They're not going to want to leave cursor. Their settings are there.
Maybe. I think it's an ecosystem thing, though. If they can export their settings and go over to VS Code and start using another AI plugin, I would actually say that's a dangerous hill there, because it's very easy to leave cursor.
Maybe. I mean, if I were using VS Code, I'd probably use Copilot because it's created by the same teams. So, like, I'm a pretty big believer in better together. Like, I have a Pixel Watch and a Pixel phone. If I had an iPhone, I'd have an Apple Watch. So I think there's that. It's just people
far away.
People are going to go with the first-class citizens these days because we've become so damn lazy.
We're not lazy. We're efficient.
Oh, I'm in VS Code. It said I should use Copilot. I'm just going to use that. What's this other AI thing? I don't know. I already bought an API key. How's it going over there? We just see the AI code editor.
I know. It's good, but I've actually never wrote code on this computer before, on the computer that I'm on. So it's like, oh, you don't have Git installed. And I was like, oh shoot, do we want to do this on the live stream? So I'm just like back here, like installing all the
that's a great one to show the Xcode select, to show all of that from the terminal if you so desire.
Oh man, here we go.
I'm putting you on the spot.
I so desire. I'm afraid to share my terminal, honestly. Although I'm not afraid to show it, I'm afraid. I just am like, I have to get past the install first. That's what I'm working on. But nonetheless, that's where I'm at.
I think the interesting thing about agent development, I'm just segueing to useful conversations while we have this beautiful, colorful overlay.
I can turn it off if we want to, but I figured people are so into cursor lately that they'd see it and be like, "This is cool."
It is. The interesting thing is that so much of what I would normally hire, like in an hourly person to do, is now, if you write a script, you can probably achieve it 15 minutes day over day. For instance, running a search on Google News and returning the top 3 headlines when you search for a certain, like a stock ticker or something like that, which you can totally do. You can do that with AgentQL. You could probably do it with unstructured. You should do it with AgentQL. But the point is, like, you can do these things. You can set up automations with API endpoints. With something as simple as Zapier, which honestly, Zapier is a lot easier for me to use than setting up like a bunch of Python scripts, because where the heck am I going to put those Python scripts? Local? Mm-hmm. Oh God. And then I have to think about like where they're living, and then I manage them, and I'll just run some API calls over on Zapier. It's able to do that. It's got even a function mode where you can do programming on Zapier. It's like glorified cron jobs. And you could create just an email debrief of all the top headlines every morning to drink with your coffee. And you could probably put some happy, positive affirmations at the start of it, just to make sure you're on the right foot. Like, and here's a picture of a puppy and you're awesome. Now, normally I have to pay for that, and I wouldn't be able to find someone who'd do it half as well as I could do it, because I'm awesome. And I know that I want puppy pictures in the morning.
So, Rachel, you're describing something very interesting, right? We're in this technical age where everybody can be a power user for their life, right? I think there's a whole talk on that. I think there's a whole talk on how do you enrich your life with these tools and unlock something that most people aren't thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually, my coworker just asked me, like, what are you doing for the holidays? You're not gonna work, are you? And I'm like, no. But I will say that my present under the Christmas tree is AgentQL and the team at Tiny Fish, because I love you all so much, but also because it's like, I should like I look at these tools and I get the feeling like I'm playing with pyrotechnics. I'm just like, yeah, you could go to Etsy. I guess you could look for some presents for some people there. But then I go over and I'm like watching what I'm doing and other, let's say, I'm not going to name any account sites, but things that actually manage my finances and make sure that I will not be destitute in a van by the river when I'm an old person. And I'm like, why don't you like think about how you could make this process more efficient and more responsive so that you don't have to manually do this every quarter. And then maybe you could do it, like, what works, what's worked for 12 years. Why don't you just more like that? Why don't you spend some time automating that? Like there are many people out there who are going to make some very immediate automations using these tools that will result in massive windfalls. I mean, I think of it kind of like the introduction of the firearm to the North American continent. It completely changed warfare, food, everything. It all changed for better or for worse. Suddenly you could bring instant death to your enemies. And Japan, by the way, the only country, the only nation in human history to reject the firearm and be like, out. Also did the same with Christianity in a very bloody way. But at the same time, you look at it, you're like, yeah, I see why they did that. Like, look how that went for other Portuguese and Spanish, trading partners. They didn't stay trading partners for that long. They eventually became colonies. But anyway, so it made it just so much faster. You don't have to be stronger than the other guy. You just got to pull faster. You don't have to actually follow and understand, like build traps and things like complex traps for deer and organize massive buffalo hunt. No. You just go out, you point, you shoot, you take it home. It's simple. One click away, food delivery service. And I look at this and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to change people's lives in some ways for the better. You will never have to worry about providing for your family again. In some ways for the worse. Where did all the buffalo go?
Ooh, that was a very entertaining analogy. Very entertaining, and I loved it.
When AI is able to replicate my storytelling, I am officially retiring. But until then, I hope I can build one that does half as well as I do.
I would chase down the build something like you. I started doing that, and granted, I haven't done it to the full lengths, but this conversation alone makes me want to push it further. But what I did is I started putting all my frameworks in there, like all my strategy. And I'm talking about Claude, by the way, if anyone specifically wants to know exactly what I'm talking about. So I put everything in there around templates and things and frameworks and how I use it. And then I question against it. And I was like, okay, this is pretty good. So then I went out and started looking at some of the where you can sort of create your own agentic type of opportunities like chat-based and some of the other ones. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, how do these do? The only downfall is Claude will go out on the internet and look for stuff where chat-based is literally just what you put in there. Obviously there's other options, right? But as I was messing around with it, I actually almost liked it more when I only gave it my information because it was very opinionated and it spoke like me. So when you write out sort of the prompt of, hey, how do I think? How do I operate? And I was actually using it to ask it questions about me, oh, what should I do in this? Right. Instead of me doing the thing. It was quite valuable, but I didn't end up I didn't keep using it. So I just shut it down because I was paying chat based, but there is something here to sort of hacking your life. Can you sort of hack the things that you spend a tons of time on, which is the exact reason that we are having this conversation is because I am spending a ton of time on understanding the developer engagement conversations at which need to be sort of invested in. And this has not been an issue in the last, and I shouldn't say it hasn't been an issue in the last few years. Developers have been shifting and moving and shaking for a number of years, right? But I will say anyone who's in DevRel can sort of probably echo this or share their 2 cents. But devs are definitely less trusting than they've ever been right now. And so they're even harder to find and track down and engage with.
With good reason. They had to live through Web3 and Bitcoin, and now they're going through AI. And it's why should they trust anybody? How many community leaders ended up being shills for shitcoins? Let's be honest. We're having that awkward teenage phase where the developers are like, I don't trust you, man. And I'm like, I would honestly don't trust anyone over 30. They got kids to support and you don't know what they're going to say to get you to click buy here. But remember Lifehacker and this book, Automate the Boring Stuff with Python? I feel like it's time. There's going to be like Lifehacker AI edition and Automate the Boring Stuff with Python and AI. And that, I can't wait. I hope that we'll still be making books because I want to get the book and read the book again. I'll probably just talk to Cursor about it. But anyway.
Just talk to Cursor about it. I'm trying to talk to Cursor about it, but my computer's like, it's installing right now, but it's,
I lied about the 5 minutes in the bathroom. What you would need additionally, because you don't have Xcode installed, is an additional 45 minutes to download to find out.
Okay, but most developers don't have this problem. It's just I had just happened to not have started coding, honestly, since I started my business and started using my own personal computer instead of my work.
You can't say that. You can't. She didn't say that. Nobody listen. Tessa's always coding. Tessa's like a power coder.
I'm like, I do other stuff, but it's not my own projects, right? And so I'm like looking at other dev tools. I'm diving in that way, but it isn't like, not on this computer. I have 100 devices around me, not this specific device that I am on, because this is like I'm on the desk. I don't know what are the Macs called anymore that are like the desktop
Mac
version.
Mini or the Studio.
I have a Mac Mini. Yes,
Yeah.
I have a Mac Mini that I'm on right now, and I love it.
Very nice.
Is it one of the new Mac Minis?
Mm-hmm.
Those are sweet.
Yeah,
those are really sweet.
Very.
Have you named it?
No, but I should. It's a good idea.
You could call it Mini Me, and
Mini
this could be your official AI bearing
I would
Mac.
name it Mini Me on the network. That would be hysterical.
That would be hilarious. I'm gonna go do that right now. Go change that right freaking now. I don't think that I'm gonna get to shed the light and be like, oh my gosh, look at the amazingness that is Cursor. So that's gonna have to wait for the live stream tomorrow. But that's okay. That means that anyone who's listening and who is like, is Tessa gonna get there? Cliffhanger.
Well,
I'll see you tomorrow.
They can go get their cursor set up.
Exactly. Probably a lot faster than me, at least on this device. My other laptop is literally sitting right here, so I could just, start doing it there, but then it wouldn't be on the live stream. So all the tech. Well, I think I got a lot of answers around what I'm doing. Obviously, I'm trying to hack my life, right? I'm trying to figure out how I can optimize. I'm trying to take my day-to-day and use AI whenever possible and whenever I can so that I can be a human when I need to be a human. And I think I'm going to turn off the screen share. We don't need to be shedding the light on Cursor for now anyways. I think AgentQL is going to be great.
Listening. AgentQL is great. But for everyone listening, I've got a challenge for you over the holidays. As you're winding down, you have a little extra time, pay attention to what you're doing in your day-to-day. Think about what processes you're repeating over and over again that you could just offload. Like, when have you ever thought, man, I wish I had an intern for this, or if only I had the time to hire someone on Fiverr, or I hate doing this, I'm going to avoid it. Ask yourself, could a robot do this for me? And that might be a little Christmas present to yourself.
So, Rachel, I'm going to rephrase that. Could AgentQL do this for me?
I didn't want to be self-serving, but obviously.
I have no affiliation, so I can say
it. I can say it too. What can AgentQL do for you? Because I fully agree, and I adore the team as much as you do. I had such a lovely experience with them. So I am all about cheering them on also, which is why we are here to begin with. So
yay. Well, the team loves you. Thanks for letting us come in and have this awesome talk about what the future of AI means for the future of development. I don't think it's all grim and scary. I think it's going to be different. And it's going to be change. And, well, it depends on how you handle change.
Ooh, let's leave on that note. That's a beautiful sentence to leave on. Thank you so much for joining me. Rachel, where can people find you if they want to come and find you and hear some of your amazing stories?
You can find all of my links at Nearest Neighbors. That's NABORS.com. Pick your poison. I'm on all the platforms. I use Buffer to repost because I am lazy.
Because you're
not lazy, you're efficient.
Yeah, exactly. Chris, where can people find you?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Christopher Swift. Feel free to send me a message, add me, what have you. I do mentoring. I do one-on-ones, yada, yada. Just reach out.
I
Love
love
it.
this. Thank you so much to both of you. I hope everyone has a fabulous rest of their day. And if you're around and you want to hang, come hang tomorrow in, hold on, let me just throw up the caption again here. I'll get really good at this eventually after I live stream for months. Join us in the developer hub. It is hub.builtfor.dev. Ryan Furr is going to host a session on Cursor, and I will have everything installed by then. So you can come hang with me then.
Awesome.
All
Enjoy that
right.
Prosecco.
Yes, I will. All right.